Okay.
Now what's going?
We're live now.
Yeah, we're recording. That's it. Okay,
All
you
right,
want to do introductions, Victor?
Okay, I think let me handle the introductions. Okay, so hello everyone and good evening from wherever you are in Africa and the world. Welcome to this live webinar on pig production planning and record management. Um, Very quickly, I'm going to introduce my co-host and the guests on this webinar. Um, I have Tony Wandela from Kenya, the founder of Hoga Hota, on this webinar. My name is Victor Ayo. I'm a swine production consultant from Nigeria, and together we'll be discussing pig production planning and record management with Mr. Minia, who is a swine production consultant with years of experience. I'd like to quickly dive into the introduction and allow Mr. Minia to introduce himself.
Good day, Victor, and thanks for inviting me. I'm a member, a moderator, admin on about 50 different groups throughout Africa and so on. So a lot of guys might have seen me posting around and so on. But also we started online courses with the start of COVID in 2020. And I've been doing that ever since and so on. As I said, I've got 34 years or 35 years now of pig farming experience. I'm farming pigs in Botswana at the moment. I've done it in South Africa and in New Zealand. Before coming to Botswana, I spent 25 years in New Zealand. And the thing about New Zealand is there's no cheap labor. So if I say I did something, I meant I did it with those two hands and so on. So coalface experience. I worked on 500 sow units, breeding companies, milking boars and doing AI. So a wide range of experience in huge numbers and so on.
Okay, so thank you very much for being on this webinar, and this is going to be an interactive session where a lot of things we actually want to discuss and learn using this opportunity. So thank you, Mr. Minia. Let's quickly dive into our discussions. We have two key issues to talk about. The first issue is that of pig production planning, and the second is record management. And there are so many farmers. There are farmers who are people, investors who are coming into pig farming, and there are other investors who want to expand their pig farm, okay, and they want to make the right and the best decision. And so we come down to the issue of pig production planning. So very quickly, what are the key factors for farmers to consider coming into pig farm or when they want to expand their farm? What are those key factors that should be considered?
Shall I go first? So Victor, the main one is money. When you start mating gilts or you start pig farming or you're expanding and so on, you have a lag time. You have time from the time you start mating them till you get your first income, which is 8 to 10 months later. So you've got to feed those pigs for all that time before you get your first cent in. And that amount of money goes through the roof. It is a huge outlay before you get there. So we'll talk about sort of scheduling these things a bit later on. But you cannot. You've got to schedule it so that you have pigs at different stages, so that the ones that's getting to slaughter weight pays for the ones that's just being born. So you've got to schedule your production on a weekly basis and so on. We'll talk about that a lot more. So the first one is money, your financial, and of course the biggest cost there is your feed, but there's all your other costs are mounting up as well. And then the other thing is, of course, your space and so on. You've got to accommodate for the extra pigs coming in with space. And of course, your building is another huge capital outlay and so on. So you want to optimize the use of your building so that you have it full all the time, not over full at some times and empty at another time, because that will get you in trouble very quickly. So yeah, for me, the two main things to get right is get enough funds to get through to your production, and the second one is schedule your matings and your farrowings on a weekly basis so that your piggery stays full and you get the most efficient use of your space.
Okay. So you mentioned two valuable points, and at the end of your explanation, you mentioned the idea of scheduling your production so that you can make maximum use of your space. And this is very critical because when we start discussing planning or planning the pig farm, there are a number of number of things that farmers are always looking out for. Farmers, we always talk about the importance of having funds. We talk about the importance of nutrition. We talk about the importance of genetics. And then, even when we talk about management, we often downplay the importance of having this kind of production schedule or production plan. Because without this production plan, evidently you can't make money out of pig farm. So there's another area I actually want you to quickly touch on, and this is how critical is the sow in planning your production target in the farm? Because when you start talking about scheduling, what are we scheduling? So that's something I actually wanted to throw more light on.
Okay, Victor, I want to differentiate there. I mean, if you're starting from scratch, you're starting with gilts, and then once you're in production, your gilts is sort of stopping holes in your production of your sow calendar and so on. So let's start with the gilts and so on. Now, the thing about gilts is that you are not in control of when they come on heat and when you mate them. Yeah, they've got to get to sexual maturity, and then you can mate them. But of course, sows, you are in control of when they come on heat, because they will come on heat after you wean them. They cannot come on heat while they're still lactating, not like a cow that's got a calf at foot and getting pregnant again. So the act of weaning them brings them on heat. And if the body condition is fine and so on, that can be 4 to 7 days and so on. But yeah, as I said, gilts, you are not in control. So what you need to do when you're starting off from scratch is to not buy, if you want to go with 10 gilts or 12 gilts and so on, don't buy them all together, because then they're all going to get on heat together. And firstly, your bore's battery is going to run flat, and your litter size and your conception rates will go down. So buy them at different ages so that you can schedule the mating and so on. So with gilts and so on, of course, you get them up to weight, and very importantly, do not mate on age. People often ask on Facebook, how old must a gilt be before you mate her? That's irrelevant, because I've seen 6-month-old gilts that weighed 50 kilograms, and I've seen my pigs at 6 months are 135, 140 kilos. So age is irrelevant. Mate on weight. And so on. And the minimum weight you can mate a gilt at is 120 kilograms and so on. So for sexual maturity, she's got to have the right weight. She's got to come on heat, and not you never mate the gilt on the first heat. Why not? Because there's an economic advantage in waiting for the second and the third heat. What is that advantage? If you mate on the first heat, if you get her pregnant, because it's the first time it's happened, the hormones aren't settled yet, it's sort of sputtering and spitting and so on. But if you happen to get a mated and so on, she will have a smaller litter. We're talking 5, 6, 7. If you wait for the second litter, you can get 7, 8, 9, 10 babies and so on. If you wait for the third litter, you're looking at 10, 11, 12, 13, and so on. So there is an economic advantage in waiting for the third heat. Of course, she's also then a bit bigger, and of course, in pigs, size matters. The amount of litter that babies she can fit inside herself is dependent on her physical size, and of course her condition, how much back fat she's got on her back to feed those babies with milk and so on. Pigs weren't made to have 15 babies. In nature, they have 2 or 3, but we don't want 2 or 3. We want 15. So we've got to have the reserves on her back before she even gets pregnant and so on, so that she can feed 15 babies and so on. So we've got to get the gilts in a sexually mature stage, get them mated and so on. And the other reason for the 120 kilos is, guys, there's a proven negative correlation between overfeeding in the first trimester, the first 3 months of, or first third of pregnancy, and appetite during lactation. What does that mean? It means if you feed them too much in the first trimester, in the first third of pregnancy, they will eat less during lactation. Now, during lactation is the highest nutritional need ever in a pig's life. So if she's got those nutritional needs and she hasn't got the appetite, then she loses the weight off her back. She milks off her back and she can drop 40 kilos in weight, which means that she will not get pregnant again after you weaning. You'll wait for 1 cycle, maybe 2 cycles. You've got to feed her that time. She's unproductive and it's costing you money. So get her to 120, then feed her lightly first through the first trimester, and then step her up in late pregnancy and so on. But yeah, get your gilts right and so on. Once you into full production with sows, then you've got to have a pool of gilts to slip into. If the sow dies or it is not producing and so on, you haven't got enough for that week, then you can slip in a gilt and so on.
Okay. Something just came up. I would like to ask a question, because there are so many people listening, watching in, and then there's so many mistakes a lot of farmers make. One of those mistakes is the assumption that if the gilt is 70 kg or 70 kilo or 80 kilo, as at when you mate or serve that particular gilt, before the gilt farrows, the gilt must have gotten up to maybe 110 or 100 kilos. So a lot of farmers like to cut corners and say, okay, you want 120 kilo at service. Okay, I can do 80 kilo. Before she farrows, she must have added maybe 20 or 30 kilo. Correct or wrong work practice?
Oh, that's the worst mistake you can make, because if you try and put that weight on after mating, it means that she will not have the appetite during lactation, and she's not. Look, gilt is only about, well, even at 120, she is only about 60% of mature weight. And what you're doing is you're stunting that animal. She will never reach full mature weight for the breed. She will always be pot-bellied, 3/4 size, and as I said, size matters and so on. So you're stunting that animal because she's now pregnant and she's still growing. And so you try and put that weight on after mating. She loses the appetite during lactation. She drops 40 kilos. Takes you 2 or 3 cycles to get her mated again. But she's basically buggered for life. She will never recover from that, and so on. Guys, look after your gilts. They are going to be with you for 5, 6 parities and so on. Look after them in the beginning, and they will look after you after that. Sorry, I think we've Victor has frozen there for a minute. But yeah, so guys, there's a difference between puberty and sexual maturity. So puberty is when they start, the hormones start cycling and they start coming on heat. But you know that that first heat and so on everything isn't flowing properly yet. sputtering and so on. You often get a gilt that comes on heat, but she's on today and tonight she's off. So and so on. So if you wait for the third heat, now the hormones are sorted out. It's cycling properly. The engine is working properly by the third cycle and so on. So get up to the right weight. Get condition on her back. You do not want a thin sow or a thin gilt going into lactation, because they will lose weight. They weren't made to feed 15 babies. So if you want it, you've got to put the reserves on her back first, and so on. So right weight, age will. But if you wait for the third heat and so on, by then she's 7 to 7.5 months already, and everything is working, and you're looking at a good size litter. Sorry, over to you, Victor. Are you back? I can't hear you. Check your microphone, Victor. Oh, sorry. You went off and I didn't go back to the stream. Sorry, Victor.
Okay. Sorry, I had network issues. So I'm back, and I've listened to what you had to say. I think we have to.
Hello, Victor. I have a question for Jacobus.
All right.
And the question is, you find in Kenya, many people who want to start pig farming, they buy sows that are already pregnant. I just wanted to know that for a farm to be profitable, at which parity should one buy a pregnant sow to start their own farm? Thank you.
Tony, the thing is, if I'm a pig farmer and I've undergone a lot of expenses to get a gilt to mating weight and getting a pregnant and so on, why would I sell a pregnant gilt and so on? Usually the pregnant gilts or the pregnant sows that come on the market is somebody else's problem sow. The one they couldn't get mated for 3 or 4 cycles, the one who's eating up her babies, the one who's tramping at half her litters and so on. If you're buying a pregnant sow, you usually buy somebody else's rubbish and so on. But sorry.
Yeah.
So,
I get it.
The thing is, start from scratch, and in the process of going through the different stages, you are learning. So that if you start with raising weaners and so on, by the time that weaner is at farrowing, you've basically gone through one production cycle, and you've learned. You've made mistakes, but it didn't bankrupt you. You have learned. You've paid the class fees, but you are so much better equipped at the end of that. Yes, it takes longer till you get to your first income, but if you start at the deep end, you drown if you don't make it. If you start at the shallow end, you can recover from a mistake.
All right. So that's okay. I think let's quickly advance this discussion because we have a lot of ground to cover. We've been talking about production planning and how critical the sow is in sustaining a profitable pig farm business. Okay, and then we looked at the idea of scheduling your sows, your farrowing, okay, so that you make maximum use of the space that you have, and a whole lot of factors. So we have a batch farrowing system, and we have a lot of farmers in Africa, in Nigeria, who practice continuous production. So they do not regulate their sows service or whatever. They just once the sow comes on it, if 5 comes on it this month, they serve. The next month probably they don't serve again, and then so between the batch farrowing system and the continuous production system, which should be adapted by a pig farmer, and under what conditions? Okay, let's just take it step by step. Which should be adapted or adopted by a pig farmer?
Um, okay, a boar can mate 21 sows in a year. And so, well, he can mate 21 sows, one every week of the year, and he mates each one 3 times. But as soon as you start mating 2 sows in 1 week with a boar, and you mate them 2 or 3 times, his battery runs flat. His semen count goes way down, and of course, firstly your litter sizes get smaller, and more of those sows will return to service and so on. So you cannot overwork a boar. If you want to make 5 sows in a week, you need 5 boars. That is the end of it, and so on. Now, of course, if you only had 5 sows and you try and make them with 1 boar in 1 week, the next 40 weeks he's going to be doing nothing, and so on. So, guys, the scheduling and so on works like this. If you have 25 sows, you can mate 1 sow every week of the year, because of course 1 sow will have more than 1 litter in a week. Now, if you're doing a 4-week weaning plus 115 days, plus it takes you 6 or 7 days to get her back mated and so on, you can have actually 21 sows will give you a sow to mate, to wean, to send to the piglets or litter to send to the abattoir every week of the year. But that does not mean that 1 boar can mate 21 sows or 5 sows, or 3 sows for that matter. You can scrape in with 2 as a sort of a once off. And then instead of mating each sow 3 times, I usually mate morning, afternoon, morning. That gives you the 24 hours of standing heat in a sow. So instead of mating her 3 times, you would skip the first one, because the last 2 is the most important of the matings. It coincides closer with the production of the egg by the female. The female secretes her egg at the end of standing heat, not in the beginning, at the end. So it's those last 2 matings which is the most critical. So if you want to mate 2 sows, and you would mate one twice and the other one twice. So now he's done 4 matings in the week instead of his usual 3. You can do that sort of now and then, but not every week, and so on. 5 is out, 3 is out. You will get smaller litters. You will get more returns to service.
All right. So you advise farmers to batch their sows, This
Yep.
is your recommendation.
That's it. So if you're looking at 25 sows giving you 1 litter every week of the year, that means that if you've got 12 sows, you're getting 1 litter. You try and mate 1 sow every 2 weeks. If you've got 6 sows, you're looking at mating 1 sow a month or every 4 weeks, and so on. Now, there's just one exception to that rule, and so on. If you've got 25 sows, instead of mating 1 every week, mate 2 every 2 weeks, so that you have, if 1 sow has 15 babies and the other one has 7, then you can cross foster, and then both litters does better and the sows does better as well. So, but if you're going to 50 sows, which means you've got 2 sows a week farrowing, then you already got 2. You don't have to then batch them up and so on. But yeah, so that if you, instead of the 1 a month, you can do 2 every 2 months, or if you get 1 every 2 weeks, then do 2 every month, and so on. So yeah, batching in a small, but that means that you've got to carry 2 boars instead of 1.
Okay.
So if you're batching, you've got to carry more boars.
Okay. Although this conversation is not really about batch farrowing, but a lot of farmers we've discussed about the possibilities of batching sows farrowing, and there are different theoretically there are different batch farrowing schedules. You have the 3 weeks, the 4 weeks, and then the 5 weeks batch farrowing systems. And for most farmers, this can create a lot of confusion in terms of period of lactation and all of that. So I really want you to shed light on some of these things practically, how farmers can implement this in their farms.
Yeah, so guys, if you're weaning at earlier than 4 weeks, then you have to have ideal conditions for those piglets. You've got to have heating, you've got to have slatted floors, perfect hygiene, all of those things, perfect housing, and so on. Otherwise, at 3 weeks, you can lose them very easily and so on, unless you've got those perfect environmental conditions and so on. At 4 weeks, 4 weeks is industry standard, and the weight you should be getting at 4 weeks is 7 to 8 kilograms weaners. Now, guys, put all your efforts into your weaners. That if you look after them well in the beginning, you will not have no problems going further on and so on. But if you stunt them as a weaner, they will never recover from that. They will be a pork weight when their pen mates or other litters are bacon weight and so on. And we'll talk about profitability of growth and so on over time a bit later on and so on. But to get fast growth, remember your weaner is the most efficient feed converter on the farm. They are equal to a chicken, which is the gold standard in feed conversion and so on. So feed them. So how do you get 7 to 8 kilograms at 4 weeks? Firstly, you've got to feed the sow right. Well, firstly, you've got to make the sow at the right weight so she's set up properly. Then you've got to feed the sow right. And industry standard is ad lib. Means as much as she can or want to eat, except if she's got a litter of 3. But the rule of thumb is 2 kilos for maintenance for the sow. Now, this is all sow food. 2 kilos for maintenance and a half a kilo per piglet that she's suckling. So if she's got a litter of 10 times a half, that's 5 kilos plus the 2. So you will be feeding her 7 kilos a day. Now, that's sort of, but of course, the day after she farrows, she's not going to eat 7 kilos. So but you're still feeding her ad lib, but she will leave. That if you fed her 7 kilos, she will leave most probably 3 kilos in the bin. Tomorrow morning, you take that old food out, feed it to the other sows, and put fresh food in. But over the first week, consumption will go up to that 7 kilos. For the rest of lactation, you keep her at 7, and then she will produce the maximum amount of milk. Remember, peak milk, the day that she produces the most amount of milk in a lactation is 3 weeks after giving birth, and so on. Now, on top of that, you've got to feed the babies extra, creep feed. Creep feed is very expensive. It's high in protein. It's very palatable. It's got to be kept fresh and so on. And of course, you've got to put it where the sow can't get to it. Otherwise, she'll eat you bankrupt and so on. So you've got to have a creep area where you can feed this creep. But guys, in a big litter, if you have a litter of 12, 13, from day 7, they will start nibbling on dry feed. That first day, the whole litter will eat the amount of food you can hold in your hand like this, and so on, just that much. Second day, they'll eat two hands full. Third day, they'll eat it more and more every day. If it's a smaller litter, day 10, I start feeding them creep feed. By the end of by the time they're 4 weeks old, they'll be eating about a kilo and a half for the whole litter. But now they're used to that food. When you take mum away, it's not a shock to them, and they've already used to the food and so on. It lessens the stress factors during weaning and so on that we'll speak about later as well. So yeah, get the maximum out of your weaners, and your production from there on is plain sailing.
Okay, thank you. I have, I don't know if Tony has a question. I'll bring Tony in
Yeah,
briefly in a
uh,
short moment.
actually, I have a question. Thank you,
Okay.
Jacobus, for much insight. Thank you for so much insight. My question is, when it comes to winning, mm, the story of fibrous food feeds, is it advisable to give piglets feeds that have too much fibers in it? Does it affect them? Does it make them get stunted or what?
Guys, why does sheep and goats and cattle have 4 stomachs and us and pigs only got 1 stomach? What does the 3 extra stomachs do for the sheep and the goat? It is there for the sole purpose of digesting fiber. Pigs cannot digest fiber. Humans cannot digest fiber. The only thing fiber does for us and for pigs is keep us regular, keep us from being constipated. That is a very important thing, and so on, to not block up. And sows that the week before farrowing and the week after farrowing, they often have problems with constipation and so on. So then you will add extra fiber. Sows, now I just said to you, a sow can eat 7 kilos a day, but when she's not lactating, we're feeding her 2.5 kilos. So there is space. She's after eating her 2.5 kilos, she's still peckish. She's still hungry. Then feed as much brands, as much fiber as you can, grass, anything to fill up her stomach as a snack on top of her feed. Not replacing her food, but just to fill her up. If you can get it free or cheap enough. But guys, all your growers, you are working at minimizing the fiber content in your feed. That if you've got a weaner with a stomach the size of a golf ball and you put extra fiber in there, it means that there's less food that they can digest, which means that they grow slower, which means you're not going to get to 7, you're going to get 5 kilo weaners. And then you think, week 4, no, I'll give them another week and another week. Now you're 6 weeks weaning and so on. And all of that is influencing your pocket and so on. Guys, fiber in grower pigs right through to slaughter weight is something you try and minimize. Yes, by all means in your dry sows, even lactating for that first week before farrowing, week after farrowing, give her a lactation diet and add a half of or full scoop of bran on top of that. But after that, even then, needs are so high that you can't accommodate high fiber content. Fiber is a no in pigs. They do not have 4 stomachs.
I think the issue of fiber is a problem for a lot of farmers because of all the feed ingredients. The ones that are high in fiber are probably the ones that are the cheapest. So a lot of farmers in trying to cut production costs, they tend to purchase feed ingredients high in fiber with the expectation that they can get something. But I think at the end of tonight, we can push the real idea that, of course, fiber inclusion in pig feed has to be brought to the barest minimum, regardless of cost. The truth is, high production costs are taking its toll on a lot of farmers, and people are beginning to question if truly pigs are profitable because most of the farmers we have now came into the business with the expectation that pigs can eat anything and everything. So when we come and tell them, look, they can't take this, they can't take that, it appears like it's going against the initial motivation, what brought them into the business. But just like you have said, a fiber is inimical to their growth, and it's not something they actually want to do. I want to take the
Guys,
conversation.
sorry, can I just say one thing there? Guys, cheap food is not cheap if it doesn't make your pigs grow. If it takes you 8 months to produce a porker, in 5 months I produce 115 kilogram baconer. So if it takes you 8 months to produce a porker, you are not making a cent.
All right. So I'm sure people listening can actually
Okay.
understand that cheap feed is not cheap at all. Because the truth is there's still a lot of advocacy and extension service we have to do so people can actually understand that this is a business that requires quality investment in quality feed ingredients. But that's a subject we'll come back maybe in another schedule to talk about. Um, we have a question here, and this question is back to sow production planning. So um, we want to bring sow production planning and how it can help the farmer to achieve uh, their market goals and also in the area of disease control. So let's quickly look at market goal. Now this is a theoretical situation. A farmer spends let's say in naira now. I can't run this calculation right now, but let's say farmer spends maybe 3,000 naira, for instance, or 3 million naira on feeding and paying salary and all of these things. And the farmer every month, now this is every month, every 31 days or 30 days, paying salaries and buying feed and all of that. And then the farmer needs to sell within this 30 days and 31 days to be able to fund the monthly expenses, okay, and still retain a decent profit that, of course, will make the business viable. How will sound production planning help the farmer achieve this kind of market goal?
Yeah, so you look, if you're not planning, if you're not planning, and measuring, you don't know what's going on and so on. So the sorry, sorry, I lost my track there. um, yeah, so guys, to 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 have a negotiation power with somebody you're trying to sell your pigs to. If you go to him and say, I've got 10 pigs for sale, that you'll get a price. But if you can say to him, I can sell you 10 pigs every week of the year of good quality, then you've got a negotiation power. If you're a flash in the pan, 1 year, one there, there's 20 other guys standing behind you, also want to sell their 10 pigs and so on. And you are standing with hands for a handout. The guy who's buying has got the power. But if you have a quality product and you have it regularly and so on, you build up a track record, then you've got negotiation power and you can negotiate a better price and so on. Yeah, so yeah, the other thing is, of course, that through production planning, you can keep your piggery full. You're not bursting out of the seams and overstocking at one part of the year and running empty on the other part of the year. Yeah, this building cost you a huge amount of a chunk of capital and so on, and it's got to be full all the time. The other thing is that with feeding high fiber diets and slowing them down, if it takes you 8 months to produce a porker, it means that you are putting 2 or 3 lots through that piggery in a year, where I'm putting through 4 or 5 lots of pigs through my piggery in a year, paying off that building so much quicker and so on. So it's all about producing regularly and doing it efficiently and so on.
Okay, okay. So basically, farmers need to keep their sow numbers flowing in such a way that they can have constant production, and this, of course, helps ensure they make maximum use of space. That's it. Then they will come down to the issue of disease control, because another word for batching sows, we have the all in, all out system, and how does this help farmers minimize disease transfer from one particular head to another particular batch to another batch.
Yep. We all do it and so on. We've got a pen of pigs with a litter, 10 and so on. Well, I farrow 2 a week or 2 every 2 weeks and so on, and then I put them all in one weaner pen, which gives me they're small, they take up less space, so that gives me a more efficient use of space. And then at 10 weeks, I wean them. I split them into males and females. So now they can't mate after that. And so on. And of course, your males grow faster than your females. So at the first week, because you've done our 2 every 2 weeks, but your first pigs ready will be the males, and then second the females. But we still try and sell the heaviest ones and keep back the smaller ones. Guys, those are the ones that eat up your profit margin. Those stunted ones, those tail end ones, send them with the other pigs. Get rid of them. Sell them as pork when the rest go as bacon. They are eating up your profits and so on. So, how does this affect disease and so on? If you have a pen empty, you can wash, you can disinfect it and so on. But guys, a piggery runs on a weekly cycle. Every week on a Thursday, I wean my sows. That means that 4 or 5 days later, on Monday morning, 90% of them are on, and I mate them in the morning, the afternoon, and the next morning. If they don't come on eaten on Monday morning, I can almost give you a letter. Monday afternoon they'll be on, and I'll mate them Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon. So Monday and Tuesdays are mating days. Thursdays are weaning days. Now, if a sow is pregnant for 16 weeks and 2 days, which means that if they were mated on Monday, then they will farrow on a Wednesday. If they were mated the Tuesday, they will farrow on the Thursday. So you can see that in a piggery, there's a weekly cycle. You do not get up in a piggery on a Monday and think, what shall I do today? You know exactly what you need to do today. Every Monday of the year, you do the same jobs. Every Tuesday of the year, you do the same jobs. It's a factory. It runs like a factory and so on. Now, in that weekly program, you have days where you do water blasting. So your pigs have gone to the market. You've moved so now there's an open baconer pen. Then you move your porkers into the baconer pens. Of course, you've washed the pork pen. You don't water blast your grower pens and so on, not that weekly type of thing anyway. But of course, you wash them out properly. You bring a new batch of porkers in. But now there's weaners in the weaner decks that needs to come to those porker pens. And then there's suckers who's just weaned that needs to come out of the farrowing crates into the weaner pens. But before the hygiene hotspots is your farrowing pen and your weaner decks. That is when they are susceptible to disease the most. Guys, remember, pigs are born with no immune system, no active immune system. Their own immune system only kicks into place at about 10 weeks of age. So how are they covered against diseases in that first 10 weeks? Passively, through the colostrum they receive from the sow through the colostrum and so on. So, guys, you to not expose those young pigs with no immune system to diseases and so on, you've got to vaccinate the sow. Now, this is my second biggest bugbear after fiber on social media, and that is you do need to vaccinate your sows while they're pregnant. You do need to deworm your sows while they are pregnant and so on. If you look at the manufacturer's specifications for Ivermac, they say do it 2 weeks before farrowing. Why do you deworm a pregnant sow? Because, guys, worms, people don't understand how worms affect animals, pigs, sheep, cattle, goats. People think that the worms eat food that they lose on digestion, that they losing food. It's not that. Pigs react to worms the same as they do to a disease. They have an immune response to the worms and so on. So now, when your body has an immune response, it goes into war mode. It's going to fight the enemy, the bug, the intruder, and so on. So everything else comes to a standstill. Reproduction, growth, everything comes to a standstill until it's won the war, and so on. A bit like America with the First World War, when they went into the war, they stopped making cars and they made jeeps, and they stopped making trucks and they made tanks, and so on. So you vaccinate the sow for lepto, parvo, erysipelas, and so on 6 weeks before farrowing, and a booster 4 weeks later, 2 weeks before farrowing. Because the booster is there because the immune response after the first vaccination is very low and short lasting. The booster gives a much higher response and a much longer protection against the disease. But you vaccinate the sow to protect the babies. Even litter guard, you vaccinate the sow to stop the babies scouring. Now with worms, with deworming and so on, with Ivermac and so on, you do the same with worms. So that, look, people ask every day on Facebook that how often do I have to deworm my pigs? And some people routinely, monthly or 2 months, deworm their pigs. Guys, if they are not infected in the first place and they do not have contact with other infected pigs, why do they need deworming that regularly? Guys, in 4 years now, I've done 3 dewormings. And when you do them, you do the whole piggery. Doesn't help you doing that one and not that one, because it will pick it up from the ground again. But start them off with a clean slate. Don't get them from birth being infected by the mum, and then it's just downhill from there. Then you do have to deworm every 2 months and so on. So get them clean. The other thing that Aerobic does, of course, is your external parasite, your mange. Guys, the most dangerous thing in a pig pen, in a farrowing pen, is the mother. She weighs 250 kilos. She's got 4 feet that's pounding around in the pen and so on, and there's 1.5 kilogram babies running around. Now, if she's itching from mange, those mange dig holes in the skin, they itch like hell. So if she's itching, she's getting up 4, 5, 6 times more than what she would have if she wasn't itching. So if you deworm her with Ivermac, you're also doing the mange. It means the sow is sleeping 90% of the day, and less time on the feet, less danger to the babies, less overlays, more piglets surviving, bigger litters going to the market, and so on. So with the scheduling on a weekly basis and so on, you've got water blasting days where you power wash your farrowing pens and your weaner pens. Then after cleaning it, you cannot disinfect a pen with organic matter in it. So you water blast the organic matter out, then you disinfect it. You spray disinfectant. I use Virkon. Virkon is a viricide, fungicide, bactericide, so it kills all 3. But you spray the whole pen, let it dry. Guy, one of the best disinfectants there is drying out. Lepto lives in water. It cannot live when it's dry. So dry the pen out. Then before you put the sow in there, wash her, scrub her. Man, she loves it. That coarse bristles of the brush. Man, she loves doing it. Wash her. Put a clean sow in a clean pen, vaccinate it, and your babies get off to a running start in life instead of being hit over the head from get-go.
All right, thank you, Mr. Minia. Now, I have a question here. This is a little bit away from this conversation. This is a direct conversation, a direct question from one of our WhatsApp groups. Since we're talking about a big setup and production planning, someone asked a question, and the question has to do with the use of deep litter system. Deep litter system, and it's becoming very prevalent now. Deep litter system, the use of IMO, and the question is, what are the advantages of deep litter system over the concrete system or the slated floor system for a commercial pig farmer with a head of over 300 pigs?
Okay, guys, I've made compost my whole life. And I say to this day, there's more money in pig shit than there is in pigs and so on. But compost, aerobic composting and so on. So, I'm a proponent for sawdust, for bedding, for composting and all of that. But guys, you've all seen, if you have pigs already, an Ascaris worm. It's about 30 centimeters long. It's as thick as a pencil. You know those big fat worms that come out. I'm not talking about tapeworm. Tapeworm has got, it looks like a shoelace. It's flat and it's got little segments. But the Ascaris worm, which is one of the main worms in pigs, produces 100,000 eggs a day, and they can live in the soil for a year in wet spots. So what does that tell you about deep litter systems? It means it's a breeding bed for worms. By all means, put bedding in, but put it on a concrete floor. It gives them something to do. It sucks up the urine, which is the main carrier of nitrogen. It dries the manure out so that you can handle it as a solid and so on. Then you can put it in compost heaps. You can turn it into cash. Long before you have your first pigs going to the abattoir, you will have compost for sale. Here in Botswana, I'm selling in old feed bags. I sell 60 liters. I sell it by volume and not by weight. For 60-liter bag, I sell it for 50 pula, and so on. In our website and so on, we've got a blog, and we actually lay down the nutritional value of pig manure and related to what it costs you to buy a kilogram of nitrogen as urea and a kilogram of phosphate as superphosphate and so on. So, and you'll see that it makes economic sense in the fertilizer value of the manure to use compost. Guys, today, fertilizer prices, if you talk to vegetable farmers, are going through the roof. The main one of those are phosphate. The world is running out of phosphate. There's only few countries that have it. Of those few countries, very few of them export it because they think, we're going to run out. We're keeping it for ourselves and so on. That is the next limiting nutrient in the world in food production is phosphate. But nitrogen, so pig manure is high in potassium, high in phosphate, not so high in nitrogen, but the nitrogen is in the right form for plants to eat. Plants cannot eat nitrogen in any form. Look, the air has got 79% nitrogen. Why do we have to put nitrogen on plants then, if there's so much of it? Because it's not in the right form. But after you've composted pig manure, the nitrogen is now in the right form for plants to eat, and it's so much more valuable that way.
Okay, so I'm sure the person is watching in. Deep litter system has the disadvantage of serving as a fertile breeding ground for worms, which affects the animal's growth. So the best solution is to go with the concrete floor, so you can easily wash and dry it out. Okay. So before we go to record management, we have a few questions on our comment box. I'd like us to take a look at this question before we go into record management. Someone asked, to sell pigs a week, how many sows do I need?
Okay, so as I said, if you're doing 4-week weaning, it's 115 days pregnancy, plus getting them mated within a week, you need 21 sows to have a litter born every week of the year. I say 25 sows because there's always returns to service, especially in gilts and especially in the hot months of the year. Guys, I worked in New Zealand 25 years. Now, New Zealand is bloody cold. It's the most northern part of New Zealand is below the most southern part of Africa. So it's close to the equator, to the South Pole. It is bloody cold. And even there, in February, which is our hottest month, you get more returns to service because of heat. Now, if you're living close to the equator, in typical hot Africa and so on, you know that that heat affects the boar, it affects the sow. I always say heat, big pigs die from heat, small pigs die from cold, and so on. But yeah, so you've got to keep them cool and so on to get maximum production out of it and so on. Excuse me. But yeah, so to get 1 liter every week, work on 25 sows and so on. That gives you 2 or 3 or 4 to slip into if one returns. Now, if you had mated 2 this week and you were going to make 2 in 2 weeks' time, and one of the first 2 return to service, to keep your averages going, of course, then in the second week, you've got to make 3 instead of, because you had now only 1 in the first week and 2 weeks later, you have to make 3 to keep your average going and so on. So it's a bit of a juggling act and so on, but that's why you also need a pool of gilts that is sexually mature, that's ready to go to fill in those gaps in your sows production cycle and so on. But yeah, so work on getting your number, whether it's 1 a month, 2 a month, or 4 a month, average going, by that if you have a return, make it up in the second mating so that you still have the right amount in a 4-week cycle. Does that make sense? Oops.
Yeah.
You've got a question there, sorry, I think Victor is frozen again. Okay, so guys, yeah, our sort of next topic is about record keeping and so on, and that's also one of my favorite favorite topics and so on. So guys, first of all, with records, if you don't measure, you don't know. Often you come to a piggery and you say, how old is that pig? And the guy will suck a figure out of his thumb and say, it's 10 weeks old. The truth is, he hasn't got a clue. And we'll talk about a way of knowing how old every pig in your piggery is. That is the most important piece of information you need to gather, is you need to know how old your pig is. Every pig in the piggery, and that will tell you your days to slaughter or how long it takes a pig to get to the abattoir. Guys, because every day you feed that pig, the first amount of food that goes into your body is maintenance food. Now, if you close your eyes and you think about your supper last night or tonight, and if you haven't gained weight in the last year, that amount of food is maintenance food. So maintenance food gives you no growth. You're not gaining weight, but you're not losing weight either. So, of course, if you feed pigs that way, you're not going anywhere. They stay at the same weight. Now, when you feed them a little bit more than that, that goes into growth. Now, guys, if you double that amount to that much, you've doubled the growth. Not the whole amount, you've just doubled the growth part, and you've doubled the growth, and so on. So basically, for maintenance, all you get is body heat, burps, farts, and manure. Okay, if you're selling that, there's a bit of an income there. But you're getting nothing in the line of growth, and so on. Now, every day they eat, of course, the first food goes into maintenance. That means that you have to feed them so that it takes the least amount of days to get them to slaughter. Now, that maintenance part, if you're feeding ad lib, is 30%. I usually have a sort of a PowerPoint that I can show to you and so on, but 30%, if you're feeding them ad lib, is maintenance. But if you're feeding them at 30 or 60% of ad lib, then half of what they eat goes into maintenance. If you're feeding them at sort of 50% of ad lib, then 3/4 of what they eat is maintenance, and only 1/4 goes into growth. So what I'm saying is, if you're producing an 8-month-old porker, you are not making a cent. Why not? Because they ate up your profit. Guys, I know a guy who started and produced pigs for a year, sent his figures to the auditor end of the year, and the auditor said, sorry, you've made no profit. And he said, what? How can I not make a profit? I've produced tons of pork and I've sent it to the abattoir, and how can I not make a profit? You didn't make a profit because they ate it up. Guys, a guy on Facebook asked me once, how can I save on my feed cost? And I said to him, my answer to him on Facebook was, feed them more. And the guy wrote back and he said, no, you didn't understand the question right. I said, no, I understood the question perfectly, and so on. And I laid it out to him and he said, shit, that makes sense. Guys, cheap food is not cheap if it doesn't make your pigs grow, and so on. If it takes you 8 months to produce a porker, you're not making a cent. So feed them proper food as fast as they can eat it. Guys, I make a cell feeder from 1 sheet of ply, a 2.4 by 1.2 meter plywood, 18 millimeters thick. I cut it into 3 parts, 80, 80, 80. The back part is the back of the feeder. The second part is the diagonal that sort of comes down, and the third part I cut up for the 2 sides in the bottom. And my pigs have got, my grower pigs, that's from weaning all the way through to slaughter, are on cell feeders. They've got food in front of them 24/7. Commercial piggeries will put lights on at night to wake their pigs up to eat more, so that if they eat more, they grow more. That's a fact. If you've got the right genetics, you've got the right food, you've got the right environment and buildings and so on, they will grow as equal to what they eat. So you want them to eat more. They switch lights on at 12 o'clock at night. The pigs wake up and say, breakfast. And they go and eat, and then the lights go off again. So they go back to sleep. And 5 o'clock, the sun comes up. They, breakfast again. And they go and eat again to grow faster. But your grower pigs need to be on ad lib and so on. Now you're going to tell me, no, but they get fat. Why do they get fat? Because they are old. Yet when my son comes and visits and so on, he's a strapping young lad, and I stock my fridge with about a month's worth of food, and he eats it all up in a week and so on. And he doesn't get fat. He just gets bigger and bigger muscles and so on. If I ate that much, I would be the size of a mountain and so on. Why do I get fat? He doesn't. Because I'm old. That's why. So that's why I said, start them off well, grow them fast. That is the only way to make money out of pigs, guys. Take my word for it. I've done this for 35 years. That is the only way to make money. Forget your high fiber foods. Don't look at the cost per kilogram. Look at the cost per kilogram gain on your pigs. I saw a guy advertising watermelons as pig food and so on, and he wanted 10 pula per watermelon. Everyone was writing there, no, that's cheap. Guys, watermelon, 90% water, which means there's 4% solids in it. So now that guy pays 10 pula and so on, and he goes and loads a ton on his back of his truck and so on. So let's say they weigh 5 kilograms each. So he's got 200 watermelons and he's paid 10 pula each. So that's 2,000 pula. Guys, he's just paid 2,000 pula for 40 kilograms of dry matter. I can do a soya for half that price and just feed him soya, oil cake. That is not cheap food. But everyone's saying, no, that's cheap. Guys, you've got to work these things out properly. And pig nutrition works a bit like an old wine barrel. You know, those wine barrels with the different spars with a ring around it. the lowest piece of wood
Yeah.
limits how much water you can put in that barrel, eh? So with nutrients, it works the same. They produce to the first limiting nutrient. If that nutrient is protein, then that's where they can't produce higher than that. Even though the energy is up here, if the protein is down there, they limit it by the protein. Now you top up the protein and so on, and then the next thing that's limiting might be lysine, amino acid or energy. Then you top that one up. But it keeps on being less than optimal or maximum as long as there's one limiting nutrient. So a balanced diet means everything is in the right proportion for maximum production to meet all the nutritional needs of an animal and so on. So unless you are feed a nutritionally balanced diet, you can. It's like it's riding in the Daytona 500 with 93 petrol. It just doesn't work. Even if you're driving a flash car, put 93 petrol in there, you're not going to win the race, are you?
Hey, Jacobus, I have a question.
Yep. Go for it.
I have a question. There's a big issue in Kenya about when it comes to fattening pigs, because people want to feed pigs cheap feeds, but they think that when you give them multivitamins, here in Kenya there is a multivitamin famously known as booster. This booster, people inject it for 1 month to make the pig fatter faster, but they still give the pigs trashy feeds. What do you think about these farmers who try to cheat with the multivitamins, thinking that you just give like wheat bran and then give it? Yeah.
There is no shortcut. It's like,
yeah.
Are you going to feed your baby, your child, all bran flakes when he's 3 months old, and then give him some vitamins to top him up? It just doesn't work, and so on. And of course, the guys selling it with this vet and this fast grow and all this other rubbish. Look, in 34 years, I have not once used fast grow or vet or any of these things that they sell and so on. And they sell it because people buy it, but it does absolutely nothing for them and so on. It is a total waste of time. If you want your pigs to grow, take that extra money you would have paid for the vitamins and buy better food and feed that to them, and then they will grow. But also, don't buy weaners that's already stunted. But get them young, breed them yourselves, feed them properly, and you will make money.
Okay, and Victor is currently backstage. Can you?
Oh, sorry.
Victor is backstage. Okay, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Victor. We lost you there for a while.
Yeah, we had network issues. I've been following the conversation, and we've actually gone into nutrition, which tries to like demystify the problems a lot of farmers are facing in Africa. The issue of trying to use cheap feed and trying to get solutions. And just like a point you raised about commercial farms lighting up the pen in the night, one common mistake a lot of farmers make, in my own opinion, is we try to assume that we know when pigs want to eat. So farmers will say, okay, pigs should eat by 8 o'clock or by 4 o'clock or by 2 o'clock or 2 times a day. And I've said in several forums, we don't know when the animal wants to eat. Probably you're giving the animal by the feed by 8 o'clock in the morning, and that's not when the animal feels like, so it just takes little quantities. Feed should be regularly available, even in the night. Even in the night, if it's possible, you can actually make feed readily available for the farmer, the pig in the night. So that's an idea. That's a suggestion that farmers should actually look at. So I want us to look at record management. Going back to our topic. The next the area we're supposed to talk about is the issue of records management. So briefly, what are the importance? What is the usefulness of keeping proper records in a farm?
Okay, as I said before, if you don't measure, you don't know. You're guessing and so on. And in business, you cannot guess. and so on. There are so many hidden things that siphon off your profit, and if you don't measure, you will not know it until it's too late, and so on. So guys, for me, my record keeping system starts with a mating sheet. My mating sheet is my Bible. So so mating needs to be supervised. You never put a ball with sows and hope it's going to happen. You know, guys, if you could get it every day of the week, guys are good at procrastination. If you can get it anytime, you'll say, I'll do it tomorrow night. But if you get together with your wife only once a month and so on, you make sure you get some, and so on. The same with boars. Absence make the heart grow fonder. If they can't get it every day, they want it so much more, and so on. So if you just leave the ball with sows, firstly, he gets familiarized with them, so that he's not interested anymore. Secondly, that he sorry, that he you don't know whether it happened. I always say pigs would have been extinct if it wasn't for the hand of man, because pigs are terrible at finding the spot. They over and under and above and below and up arse and everywhere else but where they're supposed to be going. So guys, help them. But you've got to be there. When the sow is begging for it, especially your gilts, make sure it's the first time is pleasurable for them. Otherwise, you have a problem sow for the rest of your life. The same goes for your young boars and so on. But make it pleasurable. Make sure she's begging for it. How do I know that? Okay, you don't just put a gilt in when she's swelling at the back. Wait for the third heat. But even then, you go in, climb in the pen, and you press on her back. If she's on heat, she will stand still like a rock. She will not move. It's actually a problem when you try and chase her to the mating area, because if you touch her, she stands. And you're going to go, because you can't touch her, because then she just stands. So the back pressure test. If she stands for you, she will stand for the ball, and so on. So get her in with a ball once she's begging for it. Then use a ball that knows which end is the right end to jump on and so on, not a young, inexperienced guy, but one that sort of knows where to do and how to do it and so on. Then use a glove, because otherwise your wife won't let you anywhere near her for the next week and so on. But don't use a powdered glove. You know those disposable latex gloves? You get them in powdered and non-powdered. The powder is spermicidal. It kills sperm. So use a non-powdered one. And then when he's mounted up and so on, don't grab the penis and put it in the vagina and so on, but make a channel with your fist like that, so that the penis goes in there and that this end is in the vagina. So give him a channel so that he can only go one way into where he's supposed to be going. Then it's quick. He's in there, and it should take about 3 minutes. When he comes out, there should be some jelly coming out, which is the plug that he puts in to keep the sperm in there and so on. But yeah, if it's less than 3 minutes, then sort of maybe definitely check her 21 days later. Now, then once the mating is, now you've observed the mating and you've done it 3 times. You've done it this morning, this afternoon, in the cooler parts of the day, and the next morning. So then you write her up, yep, she's mated. Then every day on Facebook, 100 times people say, is this sow pregnant? And they post a photo, sometimes from the top and the back. I don't know how that works and so on. But guys, after 35 years of pig farming, I cannot, by looking at a sow, tell you that she's pregnant or not within the first 2 months of pregnancy. There is no physical sign. If she's eaten a big breakfast and so on, she looks like she's pregnant. Halfway through the day, she looks like she's not. You can only see it in that last trimester when 75% of the birth weight is put on. So how do I know that my pigs are pregnant? I mate them. I observe the mating. I write down, yes, there's 3 matings, and yes, it took the right amount of time and everything was right, and so on. Then 21 days later, I check her for return to service. and 42 days later I check her again, then I presume her pregnant. That's how I know that she's pregnant. Not by looking at her 2 weeks after mating. There's no sign in the first 2 months of pregnancy and so on. So observe the mating, be there, see that it's happened right, help him and so on, and then check her 21 days, 42 days later. That's how you know that they're pregnant. You can buy a scanner. They're expensive and so on. Most guys can't afford them, but even those scanners, when do you use them? 21 days after mating. Now, if you're there to scan, just use those 2 scanners that you were born with. It's a cheap one. Use your eyes.
All right. So back to the conversation on records, because there are so many farmers who are basically running their farms on autopilot. So the farm is just there, the animals are there, they are eating, and there is no data on whether the animals are actually growing or not. Because that's one of the reasons why some farmers can feed for 12 months without getting results, because there is no data. You don't know if the animal is responding to this particular feed, or you have to change your nutritional plan. So um, we've looked at records in a number of subheads: feed conversion, in the area of breeding, in the area of maybe the farm's financials, in the area of feed consumption. Okay, you actually want to know what your animal consumes, and do run periodical weight assessment. Now, all of this might look general. So let's try to narrow the conversation now. What kind of record should a farmer be expected to maintain that will provide information on feed conversion?
Okay. Sorry, I got sort of sidetracked on that previous one. Can I just go back one step, and then
Okay,
I'll answer that
okay,
one?
okay.
So
So
on that mating sheet and so on, you've got your mating date, you've got your 21 and 42 day checks, you've got a due date. So those are very important pieces of information that you need to gather. The second record keeping information that you need is a sow record. So a card with the sow's farrowing record. How many piglets that was born? How many was born alive? How many was born dead, stillborn? How many was born mummified? How many were overlaid? How many were weaned? And so on for that sow, for that litter. But on that card, next time she farrows, you will have those information again. And there's also a sort of a comment section on that card, which says that I had to pull the babies, so she couldn't give birth properly, and so on. So that if after 2 or 3 farrowings, every time you had to pull babies, or she gave you a small litter every time, then you must think about culling her. If you didn't have the record, it would go unnoticed. You will not remember. You think, I'll remember that sow. She gave me a small litter. In 3 weeks' time, you think, which sow was it again? You cannot remember, especially when you get to my age. Then that what happened, what you had for breakfast is, what did I have for breakfast? But even at the best time and so on, you will not remember. So a sow card to give you a record of each parity of her production and so on, and any problems that you had. But more importantly than that, so you want a record for each sow. But, on Facebook, everyone puts up that beautiful litter with 16 babies, but they don't tell you the next one was 7, the next one was 3, and so on. What is important for you to make a profit is the average of the herd. How much does your average in your herd, how many are you weaning on an average? Not that one that weaned 12 babies. But what about the 7 and the 3 and the 5 and so on? The average of the herd. If you do not have the records, you will never know whether you are sinking or swimming, and so on. So, it's paper-based compared to electronic. You can do that on a paper and so on, but the electronic one will convert the numbers into usable knowledge. I would say if you're gathering information or records and you're not using it, you're wasting your time. Just don't do it, because you're just wasting time if you're not using it. With the electronic system and so on, it will highlight that cell. Hey, the last litter was trampled. The next one was trampled, and so on. But after the second time, you think, oh, just get rid of this old bitch and get a gilt in a place and so on. So it sort of gives you an early warning system and so on. So mating records, dry cell or cell farrowing records and so on. Then you need litter records. The litter records firstly gives you the date of birth, the ID for that litter and so on, which means that you can track how old he is at slaughter. And guys, that is the most important piece of information that you need to gather, is how old is your pig at slaughter. Because I said to you, every day that it takes you longer than what it needs to be, the maintenance part is dragging you down. You are not making a profit and so on. So I have a ear notching system that tells me, if you go to my piggery and you point to any pig and you say, how old is that pig? I can tell you at a glance of an eye. How do I do that? I've got an ear notching system, and it works on when I do ear notching, and you'll see that photo I posted on the ad for this thing and so on with the ear notching, sort of with the teeth and tailing.
I'm sorry to cut you. Here. So between ear notching, so that I don't forget this question, between ear notching and ear tagging, I think there's a difference here. You're not notching, you're trying to make incisions. And between ear tags, which is the best option, which is recommended for the farmer?
Okay, ear tag costs you 10 pula. I don't know how much that is in your currency and so on, but it costs money. Ear notch costs nothing. It just takes a little V. It's like a pliers with it takes a little V, that size V out of the ear. It is about 5 millimeters by 5 millimeters by 5 millimeter notch out of the ear, and so there's a code, and it works with a pig looking at you, because when you're teeth and tailing, you hold it, it's looking at you on the left ear of the pig. And remember, when you look over the wall in the piggery, all the pigs look at you. So your left side is the pig's right ear, but on your left side, because you read a number 52, you don't read 250. So you start on the pig's left ear, which is pig's right ear, which is on your left. And that you put your 10s, the 50. The 1s go on the right side, your right side. Now, your ear at the base here has got a thick thing, and if you cut there, it bleeds badly. So you don't want to cut there. But at the top of the ear, before the tip, one notch there is 1. 2 notches is 2. The tip of the ear is 3, and just below the tip of ear is a 5. Now on the other side, it's the same, but it's a 10 and a 10 and a 30 and a 50. Now with that, you can make 52, or you can make 99. But we notch our litters with the week of the year that they were born in. So if they were born between the 1st and the 7th of January, they get a 1 on your right side ear. That's 1. If they're born in 7th to the 14th of January, they get a 2, and so forth. So if it's now week 30 and the pig in front of me has got an ear notch for week 20, how old is the pig? 10 weeks. So I know every pig in front of me, how old he is. Now, when I load pigs for market and so on, I look at the ear notches and so on, I can see, yep, there's a pig 25 weeks, 24 weeks, 27 weeks, and so on, all in the right ratio and so on, that I send out about 90 kilogram carcasses and so on. And they range between week 25 and week 27 and so on. So 22 weeks is 5 months. So between 5 and 6 months, I'm sending out carcasses 90 kilo, dead weight, carcass weight, and so on. But if you don't know how old your pig is, then if you know Okay, so that's one thing. You need to know how old the pig is. The second thing is you need to know what industry standard is. Industry standard is at 17 weeks, that pig needs to weigh 70 kilograms. At 20 weeks, it needs to weigh 100 kilograms. Now, if your pig isn't there, then you know you've got a problem. You don't know what the problem is yet, but you can't fix a problem unless you know you've got a problem. So if your pigs are at slaughter weight or are not at the right weight for their age and so on, then you know you've got a problem. So it could be feed, it could be the quantity or the quality of feed, could be your management, could be your environment and so on. But you can start looking for the problem. You can fix one thing, okay, yeah, that fixes the problem or not, and then you fix the next thing and so on. But if you don't know you've got a problem, you can't fix it. So age at slaughter is one of the most important ones, and with a very simple ear notching system that costs you. Now, guys, I can do teeth, tails, iron, and ear notches in 45 seconds per piggy. So it costs me a few seconds in time, and where your ear tag costs you 10 pula, and so on. So it costs me absolutely nothing, and I've got that information right through the life of that pig. Those things usually fall out, or they get so gunked up that you can't read them from a distance and all that. These ear notches grow with the pig. When the sow is fully grown, that ear notch, oops, there's my camera, is about an inch by inch by inch on an ear. So it gets bigger as she gets bigger. So it's easier to read as well, and so on. So we've done mating records, we've done your sow cards or your sow records and so on, your litter records and so on. The litter records also can be used to identify, if you're selling breeding stock and you want to sell somebody boars and gilts. Now, if you've only got one boar on your piggery, then of course you can't do it. But if you've got two boars and somebody says, I want to buy some gilts and a boar, please. Of course, you want to give him unrelated boars and gilts. So your litter record can say, okay, if you take out of this litter here, this litter was born by, fathered by boar number 1 and sow number 53. This gilt here, or the boar was mated, he had a different father and, of course, a different mother at the same age and so on. So you can sell somebody unrelated gilts and boars, which breeding stock sales are at a premium if you've got that quality of genetics anyway and so on. But yeah, so those, and then of course your financial and sorry, getting to your record of Victor and so on, guys. Your feed conversion and feed records are the easiest to keep because you've got an invoice from the feed company that tells you how much did you pay and how many kilograms of each feed that you get. So you've got that record already. All you have to do is firstly either weigh the pigs before they go to the abattoir and work on a feed conversion rate of live feed per kilogram of live weight gain, or you can work on your dead weight. You've got a killing sheet come from the abattoir that tells you the weight of each carcass. So if you write down every week, week 1 I've bought so many kilos of food and it cost me so much, and that same week I sent so many kilos of meat to the abattoir, then you can, of course, okay, in the beginning it will be a little bit skewed, but as you do it regular, it will stabilize. And then you see, okay, it takes me 5 kilos of food to produce 1 kilo of carcass of meat and so on. And then you multiply it by the price per kilo and so on, and you can say, oh, shit, I'm not making a profit, or yeah, okay, I'm still making a profit type of thing. But you've got those records already, or you should be having them anyway, and so on. Now, if you haven't got a scale, guys, there are several different ways of measuring weight and so on a pig. That if you haven't got a scale, there's one that's a formula, and you take the girth weight, girth length just behind the front legs, and also the length between the base of the tail and between the ears. That's one. There's one that's actually just take the girth weight, because a pig is working out the weight is basically the volume of a cylinder. and so on. And there's a chart that you can just read off the girth weight, girth measurement in centimeters, and so on, and that will give you an approximate weight. Now, once you've got that weight, if you can weigh one pig, and you say that this thing said it should be weighing 90 kilos and actually weighs 80 kilos, so you've got about a 10% discrepancy there. But I'm 10% under what this thing says. So every time you measure it and it says weight, you take 10% off. And I tell you what, you'll be surprised at how accurate it is, and so on. But you just got to calibrate your eye and your instruments beforehand, and you can get very accurate with your measurements of pigs without a scale.
Hello, Jacobus. Hello.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for insight. I think Victor is requesting to.
Oh yeah, sorry. Back in. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry, Victor. Welcome back.
Thank you. My network keeps going on and off. Okay, so I think we can take. We've had tons of questions. A couple of questions from the comment section. We can take some of these questions. This question is from Lush Organic Gardens. I think it's back to the issue of use of deep litter system and IMO and all of that. And the question is, will composting kill the necessary worms and eggs? I don't think we're referring to composting as a way of killing worms and eggs. I don't know. Maybe you can actually help us here. The idea of composting, if I'm correct, was to address the issue of nitrogen in the manure. Is that correct?
Well, it's capturing nutrients and so on, and also making a very smelly, unstable, hard to handle product into something that's stable, that doesn't smell, and that still captures as much of the nutrients as possible. And I just saw an ad today. Somebody put his fresh manure into bags and trying to sell it. I think it's a Nigerian site as well. But yeah, people don't want smelly things to put in their garden and so on. Compost, on the other hand, if you've composted it, it smells. It depends on the bedding that you use. If you use straw or sawdust, or over here they use sunflower husks, which is rubbish anyway. Sawdust, shavings. If I talk about sawdust, I'm not talking about the dusty stuff that you get when you're sandpapering. I'm talking about the coarser stuff from your crosscut saw and so on. So coarser sawdust, so it doesn't get breathed in. But so coarser sawdust or shavings are now other things that you can use is straw. Straw loses its volume a bit, where sawdust doesn't. If you're selling by the volume, you want more volume, and so on. But straw tends to break down and lose its volume. Other good things to use is the core of maize, the inside core after you've taken the pips off. The nutritional value of that is almost zero, even for nutrients. But if you put that through a hammer mill, it gives you a really nice bedding, highly absorbent, very soft, very nice for pigs and so on. But whatever bedding you use, it sucks up the moisture, sucks up the urine, binds the material so you can pick it up with a spade and put it in a wheelbarrow. Then you build a windrow. Now, a windrow is a long heap, a rectangular heap, 3 meters wide, 1.5 meters high, and you keep on adding on the one side, so that once it gets done, you start harvesting from the back end, but you keep on putting the fresh stuff on the front end, and so on. And when you turn it, the more often you turn it, the quicker it finishes. If you turn it once a week, in 5 weeks, you'll have perfect compost. After the first turning, the temperature of that heap goes to 70 degrees Celsius. You cannot put your hand into your wrist and hold it there for more than a second. It's hotter than your hot water cylinder at home, and so on. So it fries, it boils any maggots that could be in there. It kills the fungal pathogens and so on. And so the first time is hot. Every time you turn it, it goes a little bit cooler, and you're turning it to aerate it, because from the outside oxygen can penetrate, but the middle of the heap doesn't. So you've got to turn it so that the inside is now outside and can break down. So it needs the right carbon to nitrogen ratio. The carbon obviously being supplied by the sawdust or the straw or the corn cobs or whatever you're using, and the nitrogen being supplied by the pig manure and so on. So you need the right ratio there. I use about 3/4 sawdust, in about that ratio, 3/4 sawdust, 1/4 pig manure will give you a good ratio. So it needs to be the right ratio. The second thing is it needs to stay moist. If it dries out, it stops. If you don't aerate it, it stops. So it's a living thing, and it needs to be managed and so on. But there's good money in it, guys. And whether you're using it in your own garden and selling vegetables, or selling it by the bag to veggie farmers and so on, there's good money in pig poos and so on.
All right. Then there's a question again. I think someone, our conversation on the use of fiber. The question is, does it mean that adding rice bran is not good for pigs, or adding bran? It could be rice bran, it could be maize bran, and all of that. So someone has a question.
Okay, so your bran is the outside husk of grains and so on, and that is where your fiber is, in the outside bit and so on. Now, of the fibers of between maize bran, wheat bran, and so on, rice bran is one of the slightly better ones, bit higher energy value and a bit higher protein value as well. But yes, you know what happens here in Botswana is somebody goes and buys a bag of balanced grower feed. Then they go to the local mill and they buy a bulk bag full of wheat bran. And then they go home and they mix half bran and half grower and so on. Now, the thing is that bran has got 11% protein. Your grower has got 16% protein. You mix it half-half, so you get 14.5% protein. It just doesn't work. And of course, guys, it's cheaper to just take that bag of bran and go and throw it in the effluent pit, because it's much quicker and cheaper that way. If they can't digest it, it's taking up space in the stomach that could have been taken up by something that actually gives the pig nutrition and so on. So you're slowing them down. It takes you longer. You're making less profit and so on. It does not pay to feed. And the worst of them is palm kernel and so on. I know Nigeria pig farmers live on palm kernel. It is incredibly fibrous. It's a very, guys, protein isn't protein. Protein is built up out of amino acids. And there are three that's the first limiting. Okay, so amino acids, there's 22 amino acids in proteins, of which 10 are essential amino acids and so on. Now, the essential doesn't mean that the others aren't important, but it means that the non-essential ones, your body can take one and turn it into a different one. So it can sort of play around and mix and match and so on. The essential amino acids has to come in the mouth. You have to put it in there. It cannot be changed. It's got to be supplied and so on. Now, the first three that becomes limiting in pig feeds, firstly is lysine, then methionine, tryptophan, and so on. Those three are sort of at the top of the list. Now, a protein can have 16 or 20% protein, but if it does not have the right amount of lysine and methionine, it basically means very little and so on. They reckon that if you supplied the essential amino acids in the right amounts, you can actually get away with a much lower total protein value. But it's all about the essential amino acids. And even though palm kernel looks like a reasonably high protein feed, with, of course, through the roof fiber content and so on, but you think, it's supplying protein, it's supplying poor quality protein and so on. So, guys, protein isn't protein either.
All right. Another question. You mentioned something about Vexon S as a disinfectant.
Sorry, just repeat that.
As a disinfectant. The question is how do we use it?
Sorry,
Someone asked a question.
disinfectant.
Yeah, you mentioned a disinfectant. There's a disinfectant you mentioned.
Yeah.
Vexon.
Vercon.
Yeah, Vexon S. Yeah. So the question is how do we use it in the pen?
Okay, so the important thing with disinfecting anything is firstly you've got to clean it. You cannot, but if you try and disinfect a cup that you had with your all brand flakes in and so on, and you just spray disinfectant on it and so on, it does nothing for it. You've got to wash the thing first. So in your farrowing and weaner pens, I'm talking about water blasting as if you want to get it 100%. I used to have a student. I used to manage the pig research at Massey University, and I had this student that wanted to do some practical work, and I gave him my worst job of the week, which was water blasting farrowing crates, and he would spend 4 hours water blasting 2 or 3 crates, and then I would come and check, and I would run my finger on the bottom of the steel pipe of the farrowing crate, and I say, look at that, it's not clean. And you go another hour or two, and I go back and I find another piece of poo on the thing. It's got to be 100% clean. You've got to work systematically. You've got to get all organic matter off. Otherwise, disinfectant doesn't work. So get it clean. Then you spray it on as a liquid, and at the strength that's recommended on the label and so on. You spray it on. Then you let the pen dry out. So it's completely dry. Then you wash your sow before you put her in there. So it's a clean sow going into a perfectly clean, disinfected pen, dry pen. And then your babies start off with a clean slate without being challenged in a time when they've got no immunity to cover them.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, if a farmer is starting a piggery and he or she does not want to buy commercial feed, which crops can you recommend that they can farm so that they can use the produce to feed their pigs efficiently? Yeah,
that's a good question. Of course, maize. That maize is the energy source. Now, I'm not talking about just feeding maize. It is one ingredient in a raft of ingredients. A feed that's got less than 7 different ingredients and so on isn't anything to write about. So often people ask me, can I feed bread? And I say no. Why? Because if I say yes, they will just feed bread and so on. But maize is the best energy. It's the gold standard in energy sources and so on. So grow maize by all means and so on. Soya is a bit of a tricky thing because all your legumes, whether you get any legume, which is anything that grows in a pod and so on, any of your beans, all of them has got protein inhibitors in, and you've got to heat treat them before you can feed it to a pig. Now, if you grew your own soya, there's a way of treating it to get rid of these protein inhibitors. You either soak it overnight and then boil it for 15 minutes and then feed it to your pigs. Not the water, because that's where all the bad stuff is now after you've soaked it. So that's one way. If you forgot to soak it last night, you can just boil it for 40 minutes and so on, and then feed it to your pigs and so on. But so you can grow soya if you're going to go through that trouble every day and so on. Remember your soya oil cake is already heat treated, because when they press the soya, they're after the oil. The oil is the most valuable part of the soya. So if they just pressed it to get the oil out, they would get about 12% oil out of it. If they heated it up, that oil flows better when it's warm, as you know, when you're cooking meat and so on. If they heat it up, they can get 18% oil in. So they heat it up for that reason, but then it also kills the protein inhibitors, and now we've got an oil cake that we can feed to our pigs. But guys, again, soya oil cake isn't soya oil cake and so on. The quality vary hugely. And the thing is, they advertise here in Botswana a truckload full of soya coming from Zambia to Botswana. And everyone's, yes, oh, soya, fantastic, and so on. But guys, if they overheated it, and usually it's darker in color, the soya I'm talking about, then it's worthless. Protein denatures at 60 degrees Celsius. If you heat it more than that, it denatures. What does that mean? Denature means it changes its nature. If you think about an egg, a raw egg and a cooked egg. A raw egg, the white is transparent and it's sort of liquidy. As soon as you cook it, what happens? It changes its nature. It now turns white and it turns into a solid, and so on. With protein and so on, you half the protein digestibility by overheating it. So soya oil cake should be a very light brown color. If it gets dark, don't touch it. The other thing is, some people will press it with the husk on. The good quality ones have got no husk in it. But look at the percentage of the husk, the shell of the soya bean. How much shell is in there? The more shell, the more fiber, the less protein, the less you should pay for it, and so on. But of course, people just go on per bag, that price. They don't look at what's in and the quality of it, and so on. Oh, sorry, Victor, let me just add you. Sorry, Victor.
All right. Okay. So we've come into the end. We're coming to the end of this webinar, and I think we've covered a lot of ground. Initially, we said to discuss um, pig production planning and management, record keeping and management as well. But we've actually gone into nutrition and touched some of the most important areas and cleared some of the misconception in pig farming. So, as a way of wrapping up our conversation tonight, do you have any advice for beginners who actually want to go into pig farming, so they don't make the kind of mistakes, elementary mistakes that a lot of people have been making? And yeah, so just advice. You have been in this industry for more than 3 decades, and you know common mistakes that pig farmers make. So, in a nutshell, just make some recommendations.
Yeah. So I've farmed on in three different countries. I've started my own piggeries 3 or 4 times in my life. So I've been through this process quite a few times. For beginners, I would say start with weaners. With good quality weaners, then raise them to mating weight, mate them, farrow them down, learn along the way, make your mistakes in small quantity, in small affordable batches, and so on, and not sink this, that doesn't sink the ship, and so on. The other thing is, buy your gilts at different ages so they don't come on heat at the same time. The next thing is, when you're building, don't build a piggery and then start stocking it. Build one pen and stock it with your first week or two's worth of matings and so on. So that by the time you finish building, you already got a whole 3 months worth of gilts already mated and so on. So build as you need it and so on. Of course, build the things that you're going to need first, and then the next thing as you're going to need it next in the process and so on. So start small, learn in the process, build, and so on. But the best tip I can give you guys is, I farmed in South Africa, New Zealand, and now in Botswana. But in New Zealand and South Africa, I cannot think of a farmer that does not live on his farm. Here in Africa, I cannot think of one farmer that actually does live on his farm. I think it's the Zulus have got a saying, it's the eye of the owner that fattens his cattle, and so on. Piggery is intensive. There's lots to know. It's not something you leave up to a minimum wage, unskilled laborer, especially if you do not have the knowledge to correct him or to teach him and so on. If you do that, you will lose money and so on. So get training first yourself, then teach your laborer and so on. Give him incentives and so on. So it's incentives. If you don't, you'll do the minimum that doesn't get him fired and so on. You give him production targets and so on, and say if you get more than that, you get one of the extra piggies who becomes yours. But give them incentives to do more than the bare minimum and so on. The best tip, guys, is do not give up your day job until you are in full production. I started a piggery in New Zealand and so on. I had a full-time job. I used to go 4 o'clock in the morning and go and feed my pigs. And then 8 o'clock, I'm back at work, starting my work. And then at 5 o'clock, I go to the pigs and I feed the lactating sows again and so on. But and I did that for about 9-10 months until I had a full weekly income. As I said, that you've got 9-10 months of no income and just money going out. And if you give your job up and so on, even if you took a loan and so on, keep your job until you are in full production. Keep getting an income. Otherwise, the debt runs up enormously quickly and so on. And that's what kills most guys. They just... So just one more thing I wanted to say and so on. Guys, you know, if you haven't budgeted for feed to get them to slaughter weight and so on, it takes a pig 10 weeks to reach 20 kilos. In the next 10 weeks, he reaches 100 kilos. So you can see that it grows slowly and then faster and faster towards the end and so on. If you run out of money to buy feed and you're selling them at 20 kilos, you're just not making any money. And so on. The maximum money is at the maximum weight if you're doing it right, and so on. But if you have to sell them at 10 weeks, you're not making any money. And the reason for that is that everyone works out how much does that piggy eat, and they work their profit from there. But what they're forgetting is that his share of his mother and his father's food needs to be paid by each piglet. So it's not just the food that he eats that he needs to cover. He needs to cover his share of his mother's and his father's food for that litter. Now, a litter, to produce a litter at maximum efficiency, you look at 115 days, 4-week weaning, 4 days back to pregnant again. That's 570 kilograms of food. So if there's 10 piglets in a litter, 57 kilos of that he needs to pay for, and so on, before he even start working on his food, and so on. So do your budget, get enough money. That if you haven't got enough money to take 50 pigs through, start with 10 pigs and so on, but get them through to maximum weight as fast as possible, make your money, and then plow that profits back in. But if you run out of money, you have to sell, you are just in the short end of the stick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minia. I think your message is clear. Pig farming is not a very simple, agribusiness. It's one that requires devotion. It's one that requires planning. It's one that requires anticipation for you to get the best out of it. And I think maybe in subsequent webinars we can actually talk about how farmers can sell and make money, because there are so many farmers, as a result of the fact that they do not have access to funds, are forced to sell finishers or finish the animals at 30 kilo or 25 kilo just to make money, and they run at a loss. So there are so many areas we need to talk about when it comes to the economics of pig production and where the money is. So but tonight has been very revealing, and I'm happy and excited that you could actually have me on this session. There will be questions. A lot of people got confused with the timing and every other thing. But for those people who are watching, this session is recorded. It's streamed on YouTube. By tomorrow, we'll get it up on Facebook pages and every other thing, so you can actually watch and follow up questions. You can post it to the comment section on the YouTube channel or on Facebook and any other forum you belong to. So, thank you, Mr. Minya. Thank you very much. I'm grateful, and I hope we can do this some other time.
Thanks, Victor. Thanks for inviting me, and have a great week. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.